Morena tatou. Welcome to the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group meeting on Wednesday the 6th of September 2023. Just a note to be aware that this meeting is being live streamed and the video will be publicly available on YouTube. Can you all turn your mobile phones off or put them on silent? And mokuera, ka tā koe te mahi karakia koa.
Kāti tēnā tātou kei te whare, o tira tēnā tātou ko kara pine mai I runga I te karanga o tō tātou awa te Waiari. Tēnei te tō mai, te mihi nei, te tangi nei ki o tātou mate huhua. Tēnei te mihi, tēnei te tangi, tēnei te aroha ki tēnā o tātou, me ngā mate e kawe nei nā e tātou. Hioi no, tēnā koe kei te tūru tapu, o tēnei rangapu, e mihi ana. O tira kia tātou katoa, tēnā tātou katoa. Hioi no, ka wāhi tēnei huihuinga o tātou ki te karakia. Engari tēnei te mihi kia tātou, kua ngā karawhiwhiu o waho, e mihi ana kia tātou. E haumaritia ana I raro I te tuanui o tēnei whare o tātou. Kia ora mai rā. Tēnei te kuratapu nui, tēnei te kuratapu roa, tēnei te kuratapu a ngā tuora. Tāngia he huare mōmono, tāngia he huare mātōtoru, ko te mauri tēnei o te pūkenga, ko te mauri tēnei o te wānanga. He kura huna, he kura tai ea, whaka ea kia rite, hui e, tāiki e. Kia ora.
Nā mahi. Item number 2, apologies. We've received apologies from Commissioner Shadwick Rolliston and Nick Johansson. Are there any others?
Happy to move, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can I call for a seconder? Joel Pumne. That the apologies for Commissioner Rolliston and Nick Johansson be received and accepted. Number 3, the public forum. Are there any? We haven't received any reports, but are there any call for any late items? No? Okay. Is there any change of business or do we need to change anything on the agenda? Oh, what's going on over there? Can I call for a move and a second to accept? We don't have any change to the order of business today. All those in favour say aye. Those against say no. Okay. I declare the motion carried. Item number 7, confirmation of minutes of the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group meeting held on the 7th of June 2023. Are there any corrections? Councillor Smoota.
Yeah, I'd like to, about halfway down page 15, there is a comment there I don't believe reads correctly. It says the weather event during Auckland anniversary caused a 400 times stream flow capacity. I think it should read that it increased the stream flow by 400 cubic metres a second, not that it increased it by 400 times. I'm sure someone will correct me if I've got that wrong. But it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if it was 28,000 litres per second, And to go to 428 is about 15 times, not about 400 times.
It's 400% maybe. We can confirm that, and I'll send you an
Yeah.
update.
Yep. Thank you.
Are there any other changes, corrections, comments? Okay. Then could I call for a mover and a seconder to accept those minutes, please? Thank you. Second, Councillor Scrimmager. All those in favour say aye. Those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Do we have any declarations, conflicts of interest? Kare anō. Okay. 9.1, Waiari Operations Report. Is that you, Peter? Is that you, Peter, or Calvin?
So, yeah, just the report submitted, I'll take it as read. I'm happy to answer any questions. I guess just the one comment was on the biomonitoring. Again, this is a survey that's been done that's not required under the consent, but we've done it just to increase our knowledge on the baseline. And we felt it was really important to also do it to coincide with the start of abstraction from the stream for the treatment plant. That said, it's also coincided with the Auckland or post the Auckland long weekend flooding, and that has had a direct bearing on the results of this monitoring survey. And that's been clearly documented through the report, but it's good to get that information, I think, during an event like this, so that we get a better understanding of stream characteristics when flooding does occur. But happy to take any questions.
Joel, you pātautau? Maru? Okay. Given there's no questions, no further questions on the report, can I call for a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendation is that the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group receives the Waiari Operations Report, and we've received questions, and I've checked with everyone, no one wishes to ask any further discussion, so all those in favour say aye. All those against say no. I declare the motion carried. 9.2, Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group Cultural Recognition Development Update. Thank you, Calvin.
I've asked Sam Hemmer to come up and join us because he's a pivotal part of this whole initiative discussion. So I'll take the report as read. I've tried to, I've modified this report, one, to try and keep a running tally of changes that occur in the meeting. So you'll see at the back of the report we've put the agenda and the minutes from each of the two really successful meetings we've had to date. Within this report you'll see still some blank tables with some dollars and cents to go in. I'll start to populate those, so at the next meeting you'll start to see a lot more in-depth dollars and cents as we work our way through each of the 6 initiatives and get more around an understanding of the scope and what sort of dollars and cents that need to be appropriately put in there. I thought, with your permission, that we would probably just run through each of the initiatives and then open up for some general discussion. Obviously, a lot of the people within the room have a really good understanding being at the meeting, but there's also conscious a number of people that weren't here that probably may have some pertinent questions to ask. I know that as recent as today, Kepper Morgan had sent through an email to me this morning just giving me a little bit of an update, but I'd probably throw it open to Sam to give some maybe a bit more discussion on the first initiative.
Tutahi ke te miha atu ki a koutou, kia koe te tuahine ke te miha atu, o tira te whānau, te wakataroa ki tai, ke te miha atu kia tātou. Me nā kaurihira, te whare kaurihira, tēnā tātou. Thanks, Calvin. Yeah, so in terms of just an update with, specifically I'll start with the Māori model application, which is the first initiative, is that Kepper has actually been away for a while, couple of months, so I've been able to catch up with him in the last week and a half to get a bit of a steer on where we're going to sit with that. And so his update is that we plan to have at least another workshop, a workshop we've been wanting to do for the last few months, to continue to put indicators inside the Māori model, to flesh away at the information that's needed to populate that model. We're planning to do that wānanga at least before Christmas with our tangatas, and also start chipping away at a couple of other things that are peripherals to the Māori model, i.e. working with Waitaha Whakaue on their whakaaro and input into the model, because Tokweka have sort of led that way, sort of led that space, and now we just wanted to come around to make sure that we are getting some good quality input into that. That'll start out, kick off. We're going to have Kepa involved on the 21st of September. He's going to come and be with us, so looking forward to that. Is there anything else you need?
No, that's good.
Okay, covers it. Kia koe. Yep.
Okay. So, any questions on that particular initiative?
Yeah, the Māori model, and this whole project is important to the Three Waters. And there's two things that we're battling with. One is property rights, and the other is customary rights. The property rights issue is territorial. This is Western Bay's boundary, this is Tauranga City's boundary. But if you ask the fish, do they know where the boundaries are? And the fish don't know where the boundaries are. So there's a customary right that runs in line with the model of Māori, the life force of the river. Because the fish and the birds are our tuakanas, they're our elders. Because if you want fish, the fish will tell you how bad the creek is upstream. And of course, we've got to listen to the fish, the birds, the bees and the trees. And I want to be a bit critical on smart growth, because smart growth is about managing growth. But I think market-driven growth interfered with managing growth. What that means is that the bricks and mortar were put in the wrong place of the foreland water. In other words, we didn't take enough care in looking after the mountains to the sea. So that's the Māori model, the life force of the river. It's not based on some academic theory. It's throw your line in the water and see where the fish are. I just want to make that critical point in terms of the difference when we planning out these plans. The other thing is in terms of who's involved in it. We have there's affected parties and those who have treaty claims and those who are in charge of the RMA, national policies and all those sort of things. They're affected parties. They have to be brought in kicking and screaming. And then there are interested parties, those parties who just have an interest. That has to be mapped out in the thinking of putting a paper together. So the affected parties are the parties who's got arms of legislation, cash, and responsibility to the Kaitiaki. In effect, that'll show us a direction in terms of how we're going to deal with three borders. Long-winded, but I'm always long-winded.
Kia ora tātou. Since we're talking about the Māori, do we know what impact the Gabriel's had on the Māori of the Waiari?
Good question. Good question.
And
I don't have an answer for you, but I'm looking to Peter over there, but I don't think we could give an answer at the moment. No. All we know there's been a change in the landscape, some of the landscape, and that maybe erosion may have occurred a bit faster due to the outcome of that storm event. That's probably all you could visually say. But Ruben, I don't know if you could draw anything from that.
I mean, not for me to say what the mode is, I don't think. Sorry. Yeah, I could think the answer about the mode of the stream is not something that I could answer, and it's probably not a science question, but it's a question for the tangata whenua around the table, in my mind. And the way that I understand Kepa's model is that if collectively we're looking at the right things, we can use that model to see whether it's improving or declining, right?
Sorry, I might just add that I think we should just table that in terms of when we sit with Dr. Kepa, and I no doubt he'll want to extrapolate all sorts of data information that'll help him to maybe answer that at the hui on the 21st.
I'll suggest that we visit this every Waiari Kaitiaki advisory meeting so that we can bring it into the mix and be across the state of the Māori.
Sorry, Joel, so you're recommending that a Māori report be presented to the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group each meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Did I capture that? Thank you. Is there any further comment on that aspect of this report?
Yeah, if I could add, if you're an affected party, you have the instruments, and collectively, there's an opportunity to who pays the piper. So the bill is not left up to, say, Tauranga City Council. The regional council has to be brought kicking and screaming into the play. Because, one, they have the port funds, and the port is essentially the plan. That is the economic development of the region. Because all the logs that comes from the central North Island ends up on the wharf. They go to Japan, and that opens up the economy. This project here is part of the regional economy. So if it's part of the regional economy, all interested parties and affected parties have to be included and to bring their checkbooks with them. That's how you pay for it.
Are there any further comments on the Māori report? Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Moving on to the next initiative, which would be the rest area. Do you want to comment on with Elva, how you've been getting on with Elva?
Yeah, no point. Actually, initiatives 4, 5 and 6, which is the rest area, Tohu Māori, the storytelling cultural initiative, and river access. This group have decided that it's all in one. It's a united sort of approach because it all impacts each other. So it's really an update for all three of those initiatives. One of the good things since our last hui, CAG hui, is that Western Bay have actively been positioning themselves to support and lead in some of these initiatives, specifically the ones that have to do with land or land parcels along the Awa, the Waiari Bridge, and the support of storytelling. So they've taken that lead, and we've really it's just been a really great process over the last sort of month or so. And Chris has been able to go back to his team and develop a little bit of a small team around him to put his hand up and get involved. So we now are aware that Alva Conroy has been employed to support those three initiatives, which is really, it's a big chunk of work, looking at what tangata whenua are looking for. So river access, but not just river access, the access for tangata whenua, and the ability to continue their cultural practices. There's a lot of sort of complexities involved, and so it's great to see that there's somebody dedicated to that. So that's been an update in the last couple of weeks. I was able to meet with Alva. Alva and I have met to figure out a program of work that supports what she's doing, as well as what we're doing for Tauranga City Council, so to ensure that there's some consistency across that, because no doubt there's opportunity to miss some things, but we met to try and make sure that we've got a bit of a program. So we're working on that program, and part of that program is to have at least a criteria set to go, well, what are the things in each, specifically, if I'm specific to the river access, there's six spots that tangata whenua have identified, but all those 6 spots have levels of complexity. So creating a criteria that works for tangata whenua and council to look at in depth of how we approach each one of those is helpful, and that's what we're chipping away at now. On top of that, Alva's will be attending our monthly hui to provide those updates. So therefore, a little bit of traction's, been communicated back to Laropu. Regarding the Waiari Bridge area, we understand that has been put through the LTP process, and we've been given an update from Chris about that. So that's in the mix, as we understand, and obviously it goes through its process. But this group is aware of that, have commented on that, and happy to move things forward. We've also got the storytelling, cultural interpretation kaupapa, so that relates to not only the awa, but the 6 sites that have been identified, and all those sites have special significance. So part of that is one of the questions I think at the last hui was, what information do we give to the public, or is public, and what information do iwi retain for the mana of their own iwi? So we have to work through those things in terms of the way stories are told. But I think collectively we've got into a space where tangatas are happy to do that, and we've brought on board those who are involved in media platforms to support tangata whenua. So we're looking into video storytelling and how that can enhance the narrative. Western Bay have kindly sort of offered that support, so tangata's definitely going to take that, and that's another journey altogether that helps stitch this cultural interpretation or kaupapa together. But that's not the one and only. There's other things. Tohu Māori is also through the cultural arts. There's those elements, and so tangatas are working through that, as well as what is retained a hapu a iwi. And so those are the bits and pieces that we're working through. That's me in terms of report for those 3 initiatives.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask Sam, just to increase my understanding of what this is, but there's an item here that says Maori model measurement indicators on the bridge pylons. Can you perhaps elaborate on what that looks like? Is it like a traffic light and how healthy it is, or what's the
Traffic
thinking?
light sounds good. So that came about through trying to measure, when we're trying to measure things like water rising. It came about from this group to say, well, at the bridge, which is a sturdy, you know, has a pylon there, put a mark there, and that for them, for tangata whenua, is an easy solution to start measuring or getting some metrics on certain things. So that's how that's come about. Now that's been put into the cultural recognition element, and that's a kōrero to whakawhiri or to, you know, to create more discussion. But that's what that is.
Just to add to that, we were having issues with river flow data and stuff like that, inaccuracies, and it was put down to the riverbed moving, so they couldn't get accurate readings, and we suggested we could just put a measuring device on the pylon of the bridge. Yeah, I've got a comment about on page 61.27, 27A, about Te Rerenga. It's got there's lake swamps and puna there. Tapuika have exclusive access. What does that mean?
In answer to that, I think there was a comment from Raponi at the time, so I'd probably go back. I can get an answer through to him, but I can answer you through that. Yeah. Goodbye.
Kia ora mai anō tātou. It's actually just a bit of a comment to our Western Bay hierarchy to maybe catching up and touching base with the ops team who are tasked with some of this mahi, in terms of Chris and his team, to just to keep on seeing how progress is going with that, please. Just historically, there's been very slow movement around things like this.
If I may, I think that's a good idea, Moko. I think a lot of that stuff will come through in terms of when we have a little bit more detail on costs and firm proposals. Then I'm sure that will come through long-term plan workshops. I'm just going to pass over to Rachel. Do you have any comments about that process and how that might play out in terms of keeping elected members up to date on some of the proposals coming through here?
Can I suggest that we also look at access points to Ngai Nui and Manga Kino? We've obviously got points along the river and at the Konguti Awa. We're missing the source, the tūpuna. Kuna taku.
Sam, may I just ask you a question? So the 6 cultural recognition initiatives that we're working through, will they make the basis of the catchment management plan? Will they form the basis of a catchment management plan? Is that what Alva, do you have an understanding of that? Can't comment.
Karaga mōhio, not for me to answer in terms of from a catchment management plan perspective.
I can probably add that some of those things will
It
feed into it. I would think would be more an understanding.
question, if I could please, in regard to item 27F, where it talks about access being more challenging because of the stop banks. I was just wondering if we could have clarification. I was trying to understand in my mind, is that from a physical point of view or from, I guess, ownership of the stop banks restricting access?
So at that meeting, that was me, and my issues were because if you've been down to the mouth of the Waiari and the Kaituna, the point of the stop banks, yep, they're there, but my question was mainly around, do they cause the impact that we have down there? So to come from the Kaituna to the Waiari, and our history tells us that there is this island there, you have to sort of leap and motor vehicle boats. They can't. We can row up there, but you physically not get a boat with a motor on it because they're going to get caught. Yeah.
So I think you've clarified my point. It's really a physical access. It's really an issue of physical access.
Physical access and
Yep.
just the whole aspect of how we interconnect with this.
Yep.
Given that the Kaituna's title,
Yeah.
Line to Otikawa, and the impacts that will have at that point of the river. That was the reason for that.
Thank you.
So regeneration program's probably the next one, which probably dear to all our hearts, is around the development of the Waiari, to specifically around items like plantings and things. So currently we have some replanting that's taking place, which is to replace the damaged areas from that last major storm. And we've consulted and worked with various people, and it's quite neat. We have a local group from Te Puke that's being younger 16 to 19-year-olds that are involved in the planting out there. Not only that, but they have a tutor that specialises in silvicultural things, and they're on a journey to understand the benefits around what gets planted in what areas, and I think that's going to be great for them to be involved for the whole development up through there. One of the things we'd like to for future meetings, and probably as Sam talk a bit more, is around bringing you some maps, because nothing like seeing visual on a wall behind you, where we can start to show what the current thinking is and what can be done in certain areas. But I suppose you cast your mind, what did the Waiari look like 150 years ago? What can we do to enhance that again, where we are today? So I'll let you, do you want to talk a little bit more about that particular one in terms of, relationships and what we've got going on?
Yep. So grateful to Topweka who offered to sort of coordinate getting a group to do some regeneration work. One of the whanaunga here, Mike Hauraki, is involved with our rangatahi and is out in the taiao doing multiple things in the region, so being a part of this kaupapa for him was easy, and so it kind of progresses the cultural initiative regarding regeneration, and for future kaupapa down the line. In terms of I think in terms of regarding the when we meet next and having maps, I think it needs to be. I think we'll just make it part and parcel of the report, really, because words can say so much, but I think when you start realising the amount of work that has been done, the likes of Alva, the likes of myself, and the staff at TCC can provide that and answer, questions specifically when we see it, and we can see where the impacts are. So that was about. Good point.
And the last but no means least is quite a big one, is the education employment pathways. So that's an area.
Can I just ask a question? I just want to go back to point number 32. So it talks about now our river restoration programs. and it talks about restoring the biodiversity of the 14 rivers from mountains to sea. My question around that is, I know that we're working with Tapuika Iwi Authority, and we've got a group of youth that are doing this nature program. I'm concerned that we've got it there that we would look at an approach on the biodiversity of the 14 rivers, because our Waitaha whānau, they have issues with the raparapa ahoe. And yes, they have resulted from number 4 road, they've resulted from the flooding and the rest. So I'm asking, is there an approach in that 14 rivers that the raparapa ahoe is part of this restoration program? And therefore, could we take that conversation back with Te Kapua Waitaha and they bring it back to the table to see? Because if you've been to if you've been out to Waitaha, and I'm not going to refer to it because it should be known as a different name, and I support the people in that. So to talk about Motunarara, we need to talk about the awa and the damages that have happened as a result. So are we able to capture that as a feeder into the kaituna through this program?
My only comment is, yeah, anything that you want to include that'll inform these initiatives, do it, I suppose, because this is information that's come straight from Doc, from Rapuni, in terms of what that program is all about, which includes his 14 awa. I think when we take learnings, because this whole section is about the current programs and initiatives that are out in our area, if that means we take some initiatives or take something that we can take from this and build it into whatever we're developing here, I see no reason why not.
Therefore, can I recommend that Maru Tapsel Mokuera, as Te Kapua Waitaha reps, go back and speak to our ropu that are working in that space and come back to us with a plan for that, so that we can start that initiative. Yeah, having being Waitaha descent myself, I have concerns, and I'd really like to see if we can get some moving forward, positive movements. Thank you. Is there any other comments?
There should be a broader policy on that. And you mentioned mountains to the sea. We had the argument, or we had the debate with Judge Smith at the particular time of this project here. Mountains to the sea was raised. And the Waiari was highly important because the Tauranga City Council wanted X amount of water from the Waiari. The Waiari is the heart of the water supply, if you like, and all the blood veins that runs to the heart are those streams from the mountains to the sea. They're the arteries that lead into the main artery that is the heart of the water supply to Tauranga City Council, put it in those terms. So it's not only the raparapa hoe that has to be looked at, there needs to be a policy that looks after all the streams that links to the Waiari and to the kaituna, for that matter. Yeah. And that could be a natural policy, that's a three waters policy, that's a regional council policy, and what they need to do is bring their checkbooks to the party to fix up mountains to the sea and the blood veins that run into the Waiari.
Maru, like me, we got to get into the 21st century. We can't use checkbooks anymore. We have to use credit cards or something like that. With your permission, the last one I started on was education employment pathways. It is a big piece of work, and at the time of our last get together, there are a number of opportunities on paper, and I've indicated when we get together, our next meeting, we'll have a bit more detail to talk around that. There's opportunity right across not just our 3 councils that are jointly here, but in other opportunities within the private sector too. And I talked about those, some of the things that Tauranga City involved within its community. So while it says there's no real action, there has been a lot of talking going on, but I need to put something on paper and then be able to bring that back to the group. Do consider it a very important one, especially if you are involved in the 3 waters reforms and knowing where that could end up at the end of the day. So, that really is just a snapshot of the 6 initiatives we have. I did have one other item which we'd raised at our meetings, and Moku had asked me around the question, what does Waiari Stage 2 and Stage 3 mean? So I've just got a couple of PowerPoints to show you here around this whole concept. If it could just bring that map up would be the great one to show. Probably the next one. And again, this is just a conceptual to try and explain what Waiari Stage 2 and 3 is. So ultimately, it needs to be renamed. It shouldn't be called that. What we're talking about here is bulk water mains within the urban centre of the Mount. And so the map here explains the Stage 2 to halfway down towards the Mount, and Stage 3 is going to the Mount. There are existing reservoirs located in various places. The team are working through a conceptual design at the moment, and so there has been some initial discussions with various parties, but nothing has been fixed at the moment. And I just wanted to highlight that there's a misconception around that word Waiari. Certainly it's conveying water supply, and it is water that's coming from the Waiari. It's going to a storage tank, but these 2 particular projects are more around future-proofing the Tauranga city area as development occurs, and the only way to do that is by putting decent bulk water mains in, and the thing around new water mains is obviously a whole thing around sustainability, protecting our water supply, reduce number of leaks and things. These are designed to be able to get water to a specific point and then distribute it out from there. So really that's really what it was, those 2 particular projects. As we work our way down this, we'll obviously be able to share more information. But that's really was just to be able to report back to you. You asked that question, so I thought we deserve to give you an answer around what it is. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yeah, can you point out, please, the extent of phase 2, or how far is the supply for that phase?
So, phase 2 will run from the bulk water main runs from this point through here to round about somewhere there. Discussions around this and quite shown here. That's not necessarily going to happen, but it was just a conceptual plan at the time to be able to demonstrate some options around conveying water at the moment. And again, it's based on existing reservoirs.
Yeah, I wanted to ask also, with the capacity of the consent that's been granted, what's the maximum population, human population? Because council's got to be aware of that.
The figure that we've been using is it would provide growth for another 35,000 households.
That's at full capacity with 60 meg.
Well, that would be the 45 million litres allocated to Tauranga City.
Do we know how many households are planned with the Tutumu, Papamoa developments and so on?
I can get that for you, Joel. I don't know off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's something we need to be aware of, because otherwise we're going to get into the same situation again where the population's growing faster than the water supply, and then TCC will be looking for another water supply.
That's a fair comment, and the whole part about planning is to make sure that we have the ability for growth. And I can tell you now, it's not just Tauranga City, it's also Western Bay. You have to plan for these things. We're very conscious of the environment we've entered into around sustainable use of water. That's what drives a lot of these things around ensuring, and both councils do this, have got water metering. We can actually measure what we take out and make sure it's quantified what it's being used for. But you're right, there has to be a long-term strategy around where our water allocation does come from. I have to say, one of the advantages of the water reform is it allowed us to collaboratively work as one unit in terms of that water, where our water comes from. So, yeah, just for a point of interest.
Just as a matter of interest, as I understand the report on Tauranga tomorrow and Fields for the Future, one was about the population explosion, the other one was protecting versatile lands, Tauranga City Council and Western Bay Council. So on that matter, as the population explodes, there need to be some technical changes in terms of probably secondary use water. You know, those need to be part and parcel of the planning. The use of water from sewage, where you separate the sewage into versatile fertilizer. And that goes back to our Maori gods, Home Waitikitiki, the god of the root crops, make healthy fertilizer, and secondary use for that water, which means that there needs to be some engineering planning or building plans and all that sort of things need to be included into the mix.
That's good thinking. I'm totally on board with that, and I know a lot of the staff from both organisations are on board with that too. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge the work of all those who have in developing and teasing out the 6 cultural recognition initiatives. So it certainly assists me in terms of getting a greater handle on what they, the nature and scope of those are. What I'm interested in, and when you look at the recommendations in the report, B1 talks about agreeing a priority, and then 2 is agreeing a proposed funding model in terms of the parties. And around the priority, I'm certainly looking on behalf of my colleagues some guidance in terms of that priorities, because they will also relate 8 in terms of the timing and when they occur, but also the potential funding arrangements that will go in to support them. So I obviously seeking that input and guidance. On the proposed funding model, certainly fully support that collaborative funding approach. As you said, Kelvin, there's still lots of gaps in terms of numbers going into the cost estimates and sort of what the package looks like. A couple of comments question is that in terms of that allocation of 200k, which presumably is out of the Waiari project budget, is there further allocation in that budget over and above the 200k? And then secondly, with the reference to the long-term plans, because some of these initiatives may require funding through that process, the City Council's going early on that, and we're going out on the 15th of November. Our next Waiari meeting's on the 8th of November, so it was just how we're working through that process then in terms of the any funding requirements that might need to go into the TCC LTP, given we're a few months ahead of the other councils.
Good thinking, and I suppose it's one of these things where it's taking people on a journey, and while we have an understanding of potentially some of the scope, I didn't want to predict numbers and put into this table without getting buy-in from the wider group. And to get buy-in from the wider group, they need to make sure that we've covered off each one of those scope items. It gets a little bit more complicated in terms of then if we were dealing just with one party, if it was just Tauranga City, I could do it, but we've got Western Bay to consider. We also have regional council to feature in these initiatives. So and again, I've preempted this by just putting that recommendation in, knowing full well it's pretty hard for you to do, but it's just to forewarn that we need to be at our next meeting be able to move forward on some of those things. To answer your question, I as staff can put some numbers in there to help us in our LTP, and I'll do that, knowing that we have to go early. But I just want to make the point here to the rest of the people around the table, I'm doing it for that reason only. And if it's not the right number, we'll have to adjust, but at least there's a recognition that we're putting something in the LTP to recognise that. I can't speak for Western Bay, and I can't speak for Regional Council, but the aim was to try and, as we move forward, to try and agree the funding splits and whatever,
So just then, in our 8th of November meeting of this group, that will provide some clarity in terms of the priorities around those 6 initiatives across the board, because some partners, depending on the funding arrangements, may have different aspects or commitments in terms of some of those priorities also.
Yeah, you're correct, and I mean, the finer point is that all 6 initiatives are important. They're hard to rank them, in any real order, but as you point out, some are more complicated than others. Some can happen and are happening now. Others will take a bit more planning, and if you rank them in that order based on the length of time and the complexity of them, then that's an easier way to do it, and normally those are the ones that will be harder to put a dollar number against.
And just my final comment at this point, and one of the reasons I was pleased to see all of this is that given we depart in July next year, and Shad and I have been around this table since February 2021, it would be good to have these matters resolved and in place, whatever that looks like, because otherwise I see the potential for delay and also the potential for a whole lot of, want of a better word, rework and re-litigation. So I just make that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think for me, looking at the issue of prioritisation and perhaps the funding, we need to have the items listed with their constraints. So that for me, there's three types of constraint. There's like capacity constraints on people doing the work. There's financial constraints, and then there's sort of consenting and permission, landowner kind of consents. And so before we are able to choose the priorities. We just need to have a bit of an understanding of those constraints in the round, and which ones are achievable in the near term, and which ones are perhaps possible longer term.
Yeah, no, that's comments taken, and we've actually started on that exercise, as Sam just pointed out to me, so with Alva and team. I think the other thing to think about this is that this is we're in for the long haul on this. This is not something that just happens and it gets ticked off the box. This is an ongoing commitment, and I think that's probably one of the hardest things is then there's a commitment around funding going forward, because some of these initiatives will need to have continuous funding, and it's something that we need to talk about going forward.
An important part of development is the Port of Tauranga. The Port of Tauranga is the hub for the economic wealth of the region. As I pointed that out before. And the regional council is a major shareholder in the Port of Tauranga. There needs to be a responsibility from economic development to, in other words, from economic capital to social capital. What we're talking about when we talk about the water is we're talking about social, social, cultural, and environmental. That's the capital we're talking about. There's also economic development. And what threats does economic explosion brings on your social capital is a big issue. And I think the regional council needs to be challenged in terms of their contribution from the economics that comes from the port to the social capital of the environment. That's water, birds, bees, trees, and fish.
Kia ora, Calvin. Just going back to the Commissioner's question around further allocation in the Waiari budget, I don't think we got an answer to that.
You're very astute. Yeah, look, we have a little bit of wriggle room. I think we mentioned before to move that on that 200, not by much, but we've got a little bit more there. But we were lucky that we could secure it through that project funding. So I'm well aware that we have to find money in other locations. Hence, the Commissioner has mentioned is the fact we'll have to put something into LTP. There are some things that that probably can be dealt with through Peter's operational budget, but a lot of the other stuff will have to come from a different funding source. So.
I'm not sure if I've got questions or comments. And sorry, just going to backtrack a couple of bits. I just wanted to mention the Pātaka Kai program, which is a kind of a regenerative program for awa, particularly on the kaituna, but of course there's other manga that flow into the kaituna. Yeah, I just wanted to put it out there to see if there's some kind of relationship that can come out of that. Maybe not. Alva was one of the leads on that program, so it's good to hear that she's on board some of this mahi here. Papa and Joel have both brought up some of other comments that I've was thinking of before. Just wanted to touch on, and it's kind of outside of this, but in terms of opening and iwi support for the operation of the plant, I just wanted to throw that back into the ring and to see if there's actually any kind of at least discussion within council or anywhere in terms of trying to build that bridge again or anything, or are we just going to have to just carry on as is? I'm not saying that tangata whenua have also made any discussion about maybe karakia or anything like that, and maybe the cultural art might come into the treatment plant and intake site as well, kind of thing. So just want to see, maybe it's not an answer for now, but just to just check that back and yeah. Quite.
I can categorically tell you we'd love to. We'd love to mend the bridges. I know it's very hard to try and deal with that bigger issue, totally respectful of people's position, but yeah, I'd really love if we could actually bring together and bless that plant in the right way, for the right reasons. So yeah.
Yeah, I support your comments, Mokoera. And for iwi, it really hasn't been open properly yet. And I think we need to revisit that.
Kia ora. We are neighbours. We live in the same area. We're going to operate in the same area, and I would really value us opening that door and re-establishing that framework.
Notwithstanding, there are some bumpy roads around that time, and things have progressed since then. So I think it might be a time to discuss this further, maybe. See how that goes. Hoi no, just chucking it out there. Kia ora.
So yeah, that's great, and I don't want to lose that opportunity. Can we just put that in the minutes, and the action will be between us? Probably we can do that as a group when we meet next, and let's put some things in on paper and make them happen. That'd be really great.
I would like to have a discussion, and I know we've agreed on the 6 cultural recognition initiatives. You are all aware that one of the initiatives that I would like to be reviewed and re-looked at and agreed to is a percentage of the water takes for marae. And we've had this discussion for almost 2 years. It's still not listed as a cultural recognition. I understand the impacts on how we would, what it would cause in terms of just everything, just politics. But without our marae receiving that water, I don't see that any of the other initiatives would bring benefits to all of our people, and I mean everyone that would use the marae at those times, for hui, for kaupapa, for tangi, for everything. I also understand the framework around the delivery of the water and the costs that our marae and our marae trustees receive in terms of rates. But I still want it noted that we need to have that discussion. Also, it's been almost 18 months probably now, and I did ask that councils run a report on the usage of water of our marae. I understand, and because at the time there were 2 recommendations put through, I did one to Western Bay for our marae. And Joelle also has done that, but to a certain degree, I'm not just talking about the marae in the Western Bay district. I'm also talking about our whānau here in the moana, and yeah, I'd really like to see us address that issue, because it's an issue for me, and yeah, to me that's what I would see as a benefit for all hapu, all iwi and all whānau that are affected by the Waiari water take, the joint consent, because, and we're aware of the problems. We know Welcome Bay Road, we know the pipeline goes through there, we know the right hand side is TCC, the left hand side is Western Bay, and our whānau on the left hand side are affected by this pipeline that goes past them. So I'm actually talking about all of us as a people, and at some stage for me it's where do we consider the natural justice for Māori, and the role that that plays within RMA decisions. So I don't know whether all three councils, because regional will be affected by the consent, that you have that discussion and then come back to us, or we go away and then we have our discussion. It'll have the same outcome that it's had for 18 months, but it's still not recorded in the cultural recognition report. So I'm basically seeking the support of tangata whenua reps today for that, whether it's a feasibility study, that investigation to take place, and that it be part of this funding application that we have before us today. Are there any other comments? I know you've all heard it.
Yeah, on the marae, I suppose in legislation you probably call it essential social service, provides essential social service. But it's more than that. The marae is where we bade farewell to the dead and welcome the living. So it plays a part. It's also where they karakia, so it plays part of the church. And it's also like a museum, so it plays a part as a museum. It plays an essential social service to a section of the community which requires some sort of remission or policy for remissions of cost and provided resources. The churches get that, the universities get that, the schools get that, and the marae actually plays a part in all those things. On the marae, it's your church, it's your art gallery, and it's your parliament, if you like, to a certain hapu. So there should be a special dispensation or remission in the planning documents for water and its responsibility to the community.
Kia ora, Chair Tapuika supports your comments.
If I may just highlight that the korero that Murray put forward, the schools and churches and words community benefit organisations, they all pay for their water through their metered supply. We have done work with the community halls and now extended to marae. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Rachel, but whereby the connection cost, which helps pay for the infrastructure, is free, but for water on a like metered basis, they all pay for those. If I've got anything wrong, please shout out. But I think that's my understanding.
The marae has existing use rights. The existing use right I'm talking about, it was there well before the population explosion and the explosions of development. Yeah. That needs to be taken into account.
I think Rachel wants to.
My understanding is that Western Bay has remitted the volumetric charges for Te Arawa Marae within the Waiari rohe, and however there is still a availability charge or capital charge that is still levied, and I do understand and acknowledge that that is an ongoing concern for members of this particular rōpū. Probably one additional thing to add is, of course, that water is not coming from the Waiari per se, it's coming from our groundwater sources. So the kōrero, Madam Chair, around a report, first of all investigating what consumption marae are having of any water source, both within Tauranga Moana and within Te Arawa, is something that we can pursue, and I will speak to my colleagues who I see are on the Zoom, on the Teams, so to progress that report. And I think that there's a bit of additional work that would definitely need to be done around the issue of that water source coming from the Waiari as opposed to Western Bay sources.
So just to round that off, so, it sounds like I got it back to front. Just to clarify, Rachel, the volumetric is remitted and the connection charge is still paid. Right, thank you.
So the remission of the consumption rates for Western Bay District marae, is it for the consent? Is it for the duration of the consent?
There has been no term put on it.
Yeah, and that's the key point that has been lost in all this kōrero, because when I first put it there, it was for the duration of the consent. So, and we know the consent is to 2044, and therefore it'll be up to tangata whenua and our iwi reps of the future to take that once we get to that review period. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I believe that to be incorrect. I've got it in black and white that it's for the length of the consent.
Oh, sorry, after you.
Kia ora, Bill. Kia ora. So when Sam first put out any cultural recognition ideas to the tangata whenua reps here, multiple times was brought up what challenges there might be to whakatutuki, so I can't think of the word for that, whakatutuki, all of the whakaaro that we had on cultural recognition, and multiple times council policy came up, and it's quite evident here. Is there no way around the remittance of or wavering of those costs to supply marae with the water?
There is. That is a political conversation that would need to be had with our elected members. Because it's setting precedent and policy.
I just wanted to clarify, Chair, in terms of, and I don't have a concern in terms of that further work, etc., in relation to the matters you have raised. What I was just wanted to clarify, though, is that that can happen, but the focus on those 6 cultural recognition initiatives carries on how envisaged. What I was concerned about is that those matters that you've highlighted, and then Rachel's confirmed there's further work and there could well be some, political input, doesn't delay that focus and the reporting back on the 8th of November for those 6 recognition matters. So I just wanted to clarify that.
We have one other question though, and it is to our elected members. How would it therefore be, as a recommendation from our group, would you therefore take it to your elected members for discussion and as an agenda item? The theory behind my thinking is that because we no longer have joint governance committee, we no longer have anywhere to report. That's where we reported. Mayor Webber, in his wisdom, disbanded the joint governance committee. I know there's no reason why we can't relook at it, but then that's political. So my question is, would the members of this table be the ones to take it to elected members for discussion and agenda item? Or would you like me to come and report?
Yeah, I mean, I think our revenue and financing, I think it would come under revenue and financing policy for how we rate, how we charge for these. That would come under our LTP review, and it could be brought forward as part of that. Yeah.
Basically, what I'm asking is, did you do it on our behalf?
I kind of want to say no comment at this point. Just there's quite a few issues to consider on that point.
Darlene, if I can intervene, it's probably putting the Mayor in a difficult position. As political, it really does require senior staff to put forward a paper. I just wanted to ask you, I picked up and you said Tauranga City also, so are you implying both Tauranga City and Western Bay in this proposal? Just so I've got some clarity.
Yes, I am. And it's because we have whakapapa links to the marae and the moana, and they're affected by the joint water take, and TCC, they're your ratepayers, obviously. A lot of the people that whakapapa back to our marae here, it's not just us. So yes, TCC, the marae and the moana, and Western Bay, the marae from Maikuria Whare ki Tuhiro.
So just to take this one step further then, so some form of report that would go back to both councils would need to be of similar nature. I know that you're keen that you're still wanting to link this to the initiatives, which means that probably, and in the absence, Rachel, sorry, is a senior person from Western Bay here. From our side, we'd probably have to get together and draft some form of report based on your input that would go up to both governance, but to both councils to seek further clarification on that. This, I know, has been a long outstanding matter even when I was at Western Bay, but if you want to bring it to a head and get some outcome from that process, then you probably need to, otherwise we'll still be talking about it in future meetings here. So I think that's probably the way to do it, is some report that goes out to both councils on a similar nature, and it needs to be able to follow through a process. And you've heard today that it will be a political decision, but there's a lot of things that policies will need to change to achieve that, and it's not something that would happen overnight, but you need to get some direction around it. Just trying to add something to the conversation.
Ruben, the consent conditions, would they need a review in order to capture what's being discussed about marae?
No, I don't think so. I think if this group does look at conditions that might need to change in the consent, then a variation would be appropriate. But from my recollection of those conditions, I don't think anything would need to change in relation to supply of marae. You may decide to record some sort of agreement into the consent for some sort of certainty, but I think we can do that without having to do a review.
Just for clarification, you're right. This particular item was part of the cultural recognition that was brought forward by Tangata Whenua. However, over X amount of months discussing it, we realised that it was this one item that actually had a different sort of feel to it, if you want to put it that way. Obviously, there's a political activity going on around that. So I think you have landed where we thought we would, though, in terms of tangata's realising that it does have to be addressed specifically. So we actually probably today you're starting that process because it is an item that comes up each and every time that we hui. Also, getting back to the I heard a comment about getting some information about the usage of water at marae, in particularly in the Tarawaki Tai area. Is that that piece of work was done, started in 2021, sort of ended in early 2022. A report was commissioned by this group for what does water supply look like to marae, and all the questions inside that. Me Weber put that to a stop last year, and that's no longer continued. But there is information and data that can sit there that can support a report, I suppose. Kia ora tātou.
EJ's online. He had his hand up. He has a question.
Madam Chair, just to add to what I've heard, to me it seems that there's almost 3 phases of work, none of which needs to compromise the progression of the other priorities within the framework. I think the first phase is the evidence gathering, which is Sam, what you've just spoken to. So there might be a good base of information to start with there, and that's a joint project that could be jointly progressed between the 2 councils. The question, and I guess to go back to what Mayor James has said, the question of Council's policy position in relation to water to marae, including the capital charge, whether that's a revenue and financing policy matter or a remission matter, it is definitely one that Council would need to shape up at a staff level, and probably in conjunction with the tangata whenua sitting around this table before taking it to a workshop in the first instance with Council, whether as part of the long-term plan or otherwise. And if we are extending to Tauranga Moana marae, then Tauranga City would need to do the same work. And then the third aspect for us, which I think is unique to the Western Bay, is the water source. And that is an engineering consideration, and it is a consent consideration in terms of the funding arrangements that would exist if Western Bay of Plenty District Council was to utilise its 20% allocation within that consent, 25%.
Kia ora kōrua. Just wanted to acknowledge the mahi that you're doing, Calvin and Sam. Your demeanour, your thinking, and your open heart to the kaupapa. So, thank you. It's really appreciated.
Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group receives the report, the Cultural Recognition Development Report, and B, that the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group members, well, we've discussed the 6 initiatives, but 1, we agree on the priority of each associated timing of work, which we haven't got, of all 6 initiatives, and agree to a proposed funding model that requires each of the parties, Tauranga City Council, Western Bay District Council, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, to seek funding via their individual long-term planning process. May I have a mover, please, of the report? Sorry.
Report on the state of the Māori
Oh, sorry.
of Waiari be provided to each meeting.
Yes. So there would be a number 3, a recommendation that a Māori model report be presented at each Waiari Kaitiaki Advice Group. Are there any other? I think there's a number 4, and it has to do with Te Kapo Waitaha and the report that they're going to produce on the raparapa ahui. Yes.
In terms of recommendations B, 1 and 2, I'm not in a position, we're not agreeing priority because we're waiting for that information which will come back to the next meeting. And the same with the funding model will come back. The most I could agree to on the funding is supporting the development of a collaborative funding model, because the detail around the funding and all that, together with priorities, will help inform our discussion on the 8th of November and any decisions we make as a result of that.
Did you capture that one?
Consider the priority of each associated timing work across each 6 initiatives at your next, at the 8th of
Yes, that's fine. Yes, yep.
November council meeting.
I'll reread it, right. The recommend.
What's up on the
I
screen?
can't even see it.
Can't see it. Sorry, I'll try and put that.
Thank you. The new recommendation is that the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group A receives the Cultural Recognition Development Report, September 2023, that the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group members have discussed the 6 cultural initiatives. 1, consider the priority of each associated timing of work across the 6 initiatives at the 8th November 2023 meeting of the Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group, and 2, support the development of a collaborative funding model that requires each of the parties, Tauranga City Council, Western Bay District Council, Bay of Plenty Regional Council, to seek funding via the individual long-term planning process. And C, that a report on the state of the Māori of the Waiari be provided at each Waiari Kaitiaki Advisory Group meeting. And D was along these lines, but you may need to check your minutes, that Te Kapo Waitaha provide an investigation report on the impacts on the raparapa ahui. And it's mainly to do with number 32 of the cultural report. Number 32, got it? It reads that Ngā Awa River Restoration Program, taking a whole catchment approach and working in partnership with others to restore the biodiversity of the 14 rivers from mountains to sea. And in that case, it was the raparapa ahui for Waitaha. Te Kapo Waitaha, T-E-K-A-P-U, or Waitaha. Yep. provide a report, namely to section 32 of the report, on the impacts of on the raparapa ahoi. Rapa, one more, hoi, H-O, correct, river. For the Jobs for Nature program. Okay. Yep. We're happy with that wording? Yep. May I call for a mover of that, please?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder? Meeting, yeah. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
All those against say no. I declare the motion carried. Do we have any further matters to discuss? Any late items? Carl? One, tei, rua, toru. Ka pai. Ngā mihi. Thank you all for coming today. Joel, ka tākui te whakakapi a tata hui.